In just 29 seconds, one of Hollywood's most respected actors went from sitting calmly in the guest chair to standing up, ripping off his microphone, and storming off stage while cameras rolled and the audience sat in stunned silence. What started as a conversation about politics turned into a full-blown screaming match that ended with Robert De Niro being escorted off the set of The Late Show. This wasn't just an awkward moment. This was television history. And it happened live last night. The tension started building the moment Robert De Niro walked onto the stage. The audience cheered loudly for the legendary actor, clapping and whistling as he made his way to the interview chair. De Niro smiled and waved, looking relaxed in his dark suit and blue tie. Stephen Colbert stood up from behind his desk, shook De Niro's hand, and welcomed him to the show. Everything seemed normal at first. The two men sat down, and Colbert started with some light questions about De Niro's latest movie project. "So Bobby, great to have you here," Colbert said with his usual grin. "You've got a new film coming out. Tell us about it." De Niro nodded and started talking about the movie, explaining the character he played and what drew him to the role. The audience listened politely. Colbert made a few jokes, and De Niro laughed along. For the first few minutes, it looked like any other celebrity interview on late-night television. But anyone watching closely could see something was different. De Niro kept shifting in his seat. He wasn't as relaxed as he usually appeared in interviews. His answers were shorter than normal, almost like he was holding something back. Then Colbert decided to change the subject. "You know, Bobby, you've been pretty vocal about politics over the years," Colbert said, leaning back in his chair. "You've had some pretty strong opinions about certain political figures." De Niro's expression changed immediately. His jaw tightened, and he sat up a little straighter. "Yeah, I have," he said carefully. "When I see something wrong, I speak up about it. That's what Americans are supposed to do." Colbert smiled, but it wasn't his usual friendly smile. Right. But some people might say that celebrities should maybe stick to acting and stay out of politics. What would you say to those people?" The audience got quiet. You could feel something shift in the room. De Niro looked directly at Colbert, his eyes narrowing slightly. "I'd say those people are wrong." De Niro replied, his voice firm. "I'd say that every American has a right to speak their mind, whether they're an actor, a plumber, or a talk show host. And I'd say that trying to silence people is exactly the kind of thing we should be fighting against." That last part felt pointed. Colbert shifted in his seat, and his smile faded just a bit. "Well, sure, everyone has the right to speak," he said. "But don't you think there's a responsibility that comes with having a platform? When you have millions of people listening, shouldn't you be more careful about what you say?" De Niro's face hardened. "Careful? What do you mean, careful?" "I mean," Colbert continued, "you've called certain people some pretty harsh names. You've used some pretty strong language. Don't you think that adds to the division in this country?" The audience was completely silent now. This wasn't the fun, jokey interview they had expected. De Niro leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees. "Let me tell you something, Stephen," he said slowly. "When someone is doing damage to this country, when someone is hurting people, lying to people, I'm not going to sit back and be polite about it. That's not adding to division. That's standing up for what's right." Colbert raised his eyebrows. "But couldn't that same logic be used by people on the other side? They think they're standing up for what's right too." "That's not the same thing," De Niro shot back, his voice getting louder. "There's a difference between having different political opinions and defending someone who attacks democracy itself." Colbert sat back and crossed his arms. "See, this is what I'm talking about. You're saying that everyone who disagrees with you is attacking democracy. That's a pretty big claim, Bobby." De Niro's face turned red. "Are you serious right now? Are you really going to sit there and pretend like everything's just a matter of opinion? Like truth doesn't matter anymore?" "I'm not saying that," Colbert replied, his tone getting sharper. "I'm saying that maybe, just maybe, the way you talk about these things isn't helping anyone. Maybe yelling and cursing isn't the answer." De Niro stood up suddenly, startling everyone in the studio. "You want to lecture me about how I talk? You sit here every night making jokes about politicians, acting like you're so much smarter than everyone else. And now you're telling me I should watch my language?" Colbert stayed seated but looked up at De Niro. "I'm not lecturing you, I'm asking a question. This is what we do here. We have conversations." "This isn't a conversation," De Niro said, his voice echoing through the studio. This is an ambush. You brought me on here to make me look bad, to make it seem like I'm the problem." The audience didn't know how to react. Some people looked uncomfortable. Others pulled out their phones to record what was happening. The cameras kept rolling, capturing every second of the confrontation. Colbert tried to regain control of the situation. "Bobby, come on, sit down," Colbert said, gesturing to the chair. "You're overreacting. I'm just trying to have a discussion." "Don't tell me I'm overreacting," De Niro snapped. "I've been doing this for 50 years. I know when someone's trying to play games with me." Colbert's face turned serious, and the friendly TV host persona disappeared completely. "Games? You think this is games? You come on my show, you want to promote your movie, and I'm supposed to just sit here and nod along while you spout off about politics? That's not how this works." De Niro pointed a finger at Colbert. "I didn't come here to be disrespected. I came here because I thought you were someone who actually gave a damn about the truth. But clearly, I was wrong." "The truth?" Colbert said, standing up now too. "You want to talk about the truth? The truth is that you've made your entire public image about being angry and confrontational. And now you're mad because someone finally pushed back?" The studio fell into complete chaos. The audience gasped. Some people started whispering to each other. The band members looked at each other in confusion. This had gone way beyond a normal disagreement. This was a full-scale fight happening on live television. De Niro took a step toward Colbert's desk. "You know what your problem is, Stephen? You think you're untouchable. You think you can sit behind that desk and say whatever you want, and nobody's going to call you out on your bullshit." "My bullshit?" Colbert fired back, his voice rising. "That's rich coming from you. At least I'm consistent. You stand there acting like you're some hero fighting for justice, but really you just like being angry. It makes you feel important." De Niro's hands were shaking now. "How dare you? How dare you question my motives? You don't know me. You don't know what I've seen or what I believe in." "I know what you show the world," Colbert said coldly. "And what you show the world is someone who's more interested in being loud than being effective." That was the moment everything exploded. De Niro slammed his hand down on Colbert's desk, making the coffee mug jump. "You want to see loud? I'll show you loud. You're a coward, Stephen. You hide behind comedy and sarcasm because you're too scared to actually take a real stand on anything." Colbert's face went pale, then flushed red. "Get off my stage," he said quietly, his voice shaking with anger. "What?" De Niro said, leaning closer. "I said, get off my stage," Colbert repeated, louder this time. "This interview is over. You can take your self-righteous attitude and leave." De Niro laughed, but it wasn't a happy laugh. It was bitter and angry. "You're kicking me out? That's your move? Can't handle a real conversation? So you're going to kick out your guest?" "You're not having a conversation," Colbert shouted. "You're having a tantrum. And I'm not going to stand here and let you disrespect me, my show, and my audience." "Your audience?" De Niro gestured to the crowd. "These people came to see me, not you. They wanted to hear what I have to say." "Well, they've heard enough," Colbert said firmly. He turned to someone off camera. "Can we get security in here, please?" The audience erupted. Some people booed. Others applauded. Most just sat there in shock, unable to process what they were witnessing. De Niro looked around the studio, his chest heaving with anger. For a moment, it seemed like he might sit back down and continue the fight. But then, his expression changed. He looked disgusted. "You know what? Fine," De Niro said, reaching up to his collar. He grabbed the microphone that was clipped to his jacket and ripped it off, letting it fall to the floor with a loud thud that echoed through the speakers. "I don't need this. I don't need you. And I certainly don't need this fake, shallow excuse for a talk show." Colbert pointed toward the exit. "The door's that way." De Niro started walking toward the side of the stage, but he stopped and turned back around. "You think you're doing something important here, Stephen? You think you're making a difference? You're not. You're just another person with a platform who's too comfortable to actually risk anything. You make safe jokes for safe audiences, and you pat yourself on the back for being brave. But you're not brave. You're just another sellout. Get out!" Colbert yelled, his face completely red now. "Get out of here now!" Two security guards appeared from backstage and approached De Niro. The legendary actor looked at them, then back at Colbert one last time. "This is what you've become," he said quietly, but the microphone still picked it up. "This is what happens when you care more about ratings than integrity." The security guards gently took De Niro by the arms, not roughly, but firmly enough to guide him. De Niro didn't resist. He let them lead him off the stage, walking with his head held high, even though he was being escorted out like a troublemaker. The audience didn't know whether to clap, boo, or stay silent. The result was a confused mixture of all three. As De Niro disappeared behind the curtain, Colbert stood at his desk, breathing heavily. He looked out at the audience, then at the cameras. For a few seconds, he didn't say anything. He just stood there, clearly trying to collect himself. Finally, he spoke. "Well," he said, his voice still shaky, that was something." A few nervous laughs came from the audience. Colbert ran his hand through his hair and sat back down in his chair. "We're going to take a quick break," he announced. "When we come back, actually, I have no idea what's going to happen when we come back, but we'll be back." The show cut to commercial, but the damage was already done. Social media had exploded. Clips of the confrontation were being shared thousands of times per second. People were taking sides, arguing about who was right and who was wrong. News outlets were preparing stories about what had just happened. The entire entertainment world was buzzing. Backstage, De Niro was still being escorted through the corridors of the studio. According to witnesses who were there, he wasn't yelling anymore. He was quiet, almost eerily calm. One production assistant later said that as De Niro was leaving the building, he stopped at the exit door, looked back at the studio one more time, and shook his head before walking out into the New York night. Inside the studio, Colbert's producers were scrambling. They had to figure out how to fill the rest of the show. They had to decide whether to address what happened or just move on. They had to deal with the fact that their host had just kicked off one of the most famous actors in the world in the middle of a live broadcast. When the show came back from commercial, Colbert looked tired. His tie was loosened, and his usual energy was gone. "So," he said to the audience, "that's probably going to be on the internet forever." Some people laughed, but it was uncomfortable laughter. Colbert continued, "Look, I'm not going to pretend that was anything other than what it was. That was a disagreement that got way out of hand. And I probably could have handled it better. It was the closest thing to an apology anyone was going to get." But even as Colbert tried to move forward with the show, everyone knew that this moment would define both his career and De Niro's public image for years to come. What happened on that stage wasn't just an argument between two famous people. It was a symbol of everything that's broken in how we talk to each other, how we disagree, and how quickly things can spiral out of control when emotions take over. The rest of the show was awkward. Colbert tried to do his usual segments, but his heart wasn't in it. The audience was still processing what they had witnessed. The band played their music, but even they seemed subdued. When the show finally ended and the cameras stopped rolling, Colbert walked off the stage without his usual goodbye to the crew. In the days that followed, everyone would have opinions about what happened. People would analyze every word, every gesture, every facial expression. They would debate who was right and who was wrong. They would use the confrontation to prove whatever point they already believed. But in that moment, as the studio lights dimmed and the audience filed out into the cold night air, all anyone could think about was those 29 seconds when everything fell apart. Robert De Niro had come to The Late Show to talk about his new movie. Instead, he ended up at the center of one of the most dramatic moments in late-night television history. He came to have a conversation. He left being escorted by security after calling out the host on live TV. And Stephen Colbert, who prided himself on being able to handle any guest and any situation, had lost control of his own show. The building was quiet now. The audience was gone. The cameras were off. The lights were being turned down. But what happened on that stage would echo for a long time. It was a reminder that even in entertainment, even in supposedly friendly interviews, there are real tensions bubbling under the surface. And sometimes, those tensions explode in ways nobody can predict or control. Outside the studio, the New York City streets were busy with their usual nighttime traffic. People rushed by, heading home or to dinner or to see shows. Most of them had no idea what had just happened inside that building. But soon enough, everyone would know. Soon enough, The clips would spread everywhere. Soon enough, people would be choosing sides and arguing about what it all meant. But right now, in this moment, Robert De Niro was somewhere in the city, probably still angry, probably still feeling disrespected. And Stephen Colbert was probably in his dressing room, wondering how an interview had gone so completely wrong. Neither of them knew exactly what would come next. Neither of them could take back what they'd said or how they'd acted. What they did know was that they had just created a moment that would be talked about, analyzed, and debated for years. A moment where two powerful personalities clashed so hard that one of them had to leave. A moment where civility broke down and raw emotion took over. A moment that proved that even the most controlled environments can become chaotic when the right buttons get pushed. The night was over, but the story was just beginning.